Good evening, everyone. We are Sharia Crime Stoppers, as you know. I think we've got another batch of new people this week, so we'll mention that we're part of the United West, and we're very happy to be able to continue with these webinars. You know, the webinars have been catching on all over the place now because of people are at home, and so we're very fortunate to have been using this technology, and we're grateful for that, as well as for our guest tonight, Phyllis Chesler. Good evening, Phyllis.
Good evening.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Of course, Mary's with us tonight, and Mary and I are going to have an interesting conversation with Phyllis. You all can eavesdrop and listen in. While you're listening to Phyllis's amazing history and background in the topic that we're talking tonight, by the way, the topic tonight is Islamic Gender Apartheid, and the subtitle there has to do with the veiled. I'm going to pull that up. Remind me, pull up the book, would you please? Do you have that book handy? Maybe not.
I do.
Okay, why don't you read us the subtitle, please?
The subtitle, I always forget, is Exposing a Veiled War Against Women.
Exactly. That's our primary topic tonight, as well as some other material. And so feel free to bring your questions forward. Mary, you're all set to deal with the questions and the conversation, right, Mary?
No, that's I'm not tonight.
You're not doing it. Okay. All right.
Sure.
Please go ahead and submit please submit. All right. Well, let's get started. Phyllis Chesler, what an interesting life you have and are still having. So give us a little bit of background about how you even got into this space. And of course, the title of one of the books that's really important is A Bride in Afghanistan. So give us a little background, if you would.
An American Bride in Kabul.
Okay, thank you.
I got into this a long time ago as an American feminist, but because I had a very unusual and important experience, I found myself, I'll even hold up the book because you asked me to do that. Here it is.
Please.
I got involved with a very charming, sophisticated, westernized man at college. I was a naive kid, and we got married and flew across. I wanted to travel, so we went across Europe, and then we got to Kabul. They took my passport away, which is pro forma for foreign brides or wives, and I suddenly discovered that I was now a member of a polygamous family. I was going to be living in Purdah with my mother-in-law, and that my father-in-law, who was one of the leading figures of the country, had 3 wives and 21 children. Now, the thing that was most shocking wasn't these facts. It was the fact that my husband didn't mention any of this. The second most shocking thing was that he developed another personality. In the West, very Western. Back in Afghanistan, very Eastern. And that meant that as a woman, I had to be tamed, kept at home and guarded and monitored. Now, I was an adventurous, independent American kid in sneakers and jeans. No, I had to have wonderful, expensive suits and dresses made for me by a tailor. And his sisters and sister-in-laws were very European in fashion, but not necessarily psychologically. So I experienced what it was like for the first wife to be utterly discarded and then blamed by her many sons because their father went on to 2 more wives whose sons would inherit a lion's share of the inheritance. So right? And also getting more attention from dad, the very absent dad. We saw what happened in bin Laden's case. Not that I'm saying my husband was a terrorist, not at all. So I also saw how squashed the women were. My first trip, I simply escaped, and I got on a bus, and I thought, I'm here in the wild East. I'm going to see it. And I got on a bus, and men began crowding around me. They thought I was an Afghan woman, and unveiled and without even a headscarf. And I got off. Had no name for what it was. I didn't like it. And then I saw at the back of that bus women in chadors, in burqas, pushed to the back where they had to stand If they were lucky, maybe there'd be a seat for one or two, and they would be holding a baby and a shopping bag. And when I got home, I said, you can't believe what I just saw.
Hmm.
And this is before Rosa Parks
What year?
insisted on sitting, 1961.
Wow.
And I was shocked. They said, oh, you Americans, you exaggerate. Oh, you're so hysterical. Or my husband said, well, it's all going to change, and you're going to help me change it. I only wish. I mean, look at Afghanistan now. It's a cursed country.
Wow.
And when the very last boots on the ground, military boots, leave, and I think we have to. You can ask me why I think that. Every school for girls, every shelter for battered women will be torched by morning. So we have a very moral decision there. I don't think the country can be westernized. I don't think we can elevate the Taliban. I don't think we can expect them to change their behavior.
Yeah.
So it's a question of how much blood and treasure do we expend in an expedition that we cannot win. We cannot win. What is the moral responsibility that we may have to the good, peaceful people, the children, the innocents, the dissidents, and they all exist there, and to the women who may or may not want to leave, and if they could be airlifted out somehow, magically, what is their psychology? How are they going to survive in the West as a unit of one? We're more used to going as individuals in the world. When you grow up in an honor and shame culture, an honor-based violence culture, you're part of a collectivity. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a daughter, and that's all that you are. You're not that plus something else. So only the very hardiest and bravest of Muslim women, and sometimes Hindu women, and sometimes Sikh women, actually escape to save their own lives. And I've been privileged to work with them and to help them. So yes, in Afghanistan, good deeds are being done on earth. Americans are moral people by and large, but yet on the other hand, it's mission impossible.
Mm.
I think knowing that it's mission impossible is probably the biggest blind spot. So people did not do their homework, did not understand the ideology, did not understand the incredible challenge that you're discussing. While you're visible on the screen, I'm just going to pull up a PowerPoint just because I want to just get people to think through this picture, if I could. I'm assuming that this picture, can you see that? Did I do it correctly?
No.
I cannot see it. No.
That one?
No, it's not there yet. How long were you there, Phyllis?
5 long months.
Oh, months.
And no. And every day was like a month. And I never stopped trying to escape after. And it's not that I was beaten. I wasn't being beaten. This was a completely, although bad things began to happen when it became clear that I was not going to stay. That is a sensory deprivation isolation chamber.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That is a prison sentence. That's a movable prison. And I've written for Middle East Forum a serious set of reasons for why America should ban the burqa and niqab, because you don't know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't see that. It's like a face mask that could be a criminal. And the hijab, a head covering, I have very mixed feelings about, because many people of faith cover their heads as an act of saying beneath God. And I respect that. On the other hand, across Europe, some countries have banned even hijab in public places and in schools because it's foreign, it's other, it sets the children, for example, apart, each identified by their religions. And that's not the French way of thinking. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting. This is actually worse than a burqa. This is actually worse than a niqab because all of those are separate. This is what's called the chador. Am I right?
This is a burqa, and it's also called a chadari.
Okay.
In Iran, they have chadors, very big, heavy black garments
The black
that
ones.
cover their bodies, and then very unfriendly, what nuns used to wear, very unfriendly head coverings. So I don't like the idea of the state mandating personal body clothing, right? I would like women to actually reject niqab or hijab, but there are some Muslim women who have very friendly hijab, colorful and dangly earrings, and it looks friendly, and there's a huge difference. I mean, I live near a mosque, and I see the women in the summer, for example, and they're wearing heavy, dark, thick material, accompanied by men who are wearing summery, light Western material, and I think something is very wrong with this picture, because the women are being forced to fly the flag of Islam, so to speak, and the men are able to enjoy themselves and be more comfortable. So to me, let me say something that's extreme. A woman wearing a burqa, and I'm right there. First, the man she's with is not going to think very highly of me, and so I'm already in a heightened, vigilant position. But to me, she's like a female head on a pipe. It's showing me my place. It's warning me of what might come. And there's some research, nothing solid enough yet, but there's some very good thinking. If you see a woman wearing heavy hijab, and if she then starts wearing niqab, and if then she's in a full chadari or a burqa, she may very well be influenced by men in her family, or forced by men and by women in her family, and they may be supporting acts of terrorism, acts of physical, militant jihad, not internal struggle. Because there was a very interesting article by a woman from Tunisia, Samia Labidi, in an excellent collection by Zaino Baron, Muslim, moderate, and other, or the other Muslim, moderate, and whatever. And she described, Samia, who lives in France now, she described how the marriage of her sister to a certain fundamentalist man led to her mother covering, and then she was forced to cover, and then she was then introduced to a fundamentalist way of life that she fled ultimately. So when I see heavy chadors and burqas, I don't think these people are friendly towards me, a Westerner, an American, and I don't know whether you need to be so fully covered in order to signify that you're off limits and that you belong to God. I don't think it needs to be, we need to have facial recognition. If we're teachers or doctors or nurses or witnesses in a court case, or if we're judges. So this presupposes that women have no role to play in the public sphere. Makes me nervous.
Yep. There's a lot of states that have actually you can't have any kind of face covering in the streets, and yet we still see that, because
Yes.
we're not obeying any man-made laws.
Well, in America, there's creeping, and certainly in Europe. Europe is perhaps lost.
Already crept.
Well, no, now with the current Wuhan virus, all bets are off the table in terms of the European Union. They're going to start suddenly becoming nation states with borders that are not permeable. We shall see. We shall see. As they're held hostage by Erdogan, a very evil actor. I'm sure you've discussed this. But, I wanted to make a point before we focus on Islamic gender apartheid per se. Just as we are reluctant to call this current pandemic a Chinese virus or a Wuhan virus, for the last 20 years, I've seen the mass media, left liberal mass media, refuse to use the word Muslim in connection with any bad deed perpetrated by a Muslim, truly so. So if people of color who happen to be Muslim blow up the World Trade Center, we can't say Muslims did it, because that would be racist, Islamophobic, and stigmatizing. So just as people are in fact, I've had two people yell at me because I insisted on calling this the Wuhan virus. given that it's coming to us from an open air, wet market where they eat bats and scorpions and very unhygienic, which is very near the Wuhan-based Bioterrorism Research Institute. What are we looking at? All we can say for sure is the Chinese government did not tell us in a timely fashion what has been unleashed. So too, the media and the universities and the United Nations and human rights groups internationally didn't want us to understand that it was mainly 19 Saudi Arab Muslim men who perpetrated 9/11. You had to say, or the Fort Hood, the 7/7. I mean, there's an endless number. I mean, I can't even remember everything that I've written about and worried about and covered. So how can we be prepared to defend ourselves or to understand what's happening if we can't say Wuhan virus and we can't say Muslim? Instead, the media has said militants, gunmen, Martian gunmen. Interesting to me, the media was very happy to cover honor killings in India if perpetrated by Hindus. They did so over and over again. But when honor killings by Muslim men of their daughters in the United States occurred, or of their wives, all was silent. So when I was tracking this, it was amazing.
You wrote a book, by the way, before you forget, you wrote an entire book on honor killing, I believe.
Yes. I have that here too. Wait.
I invite you to just pull that up.
My little bookstore, yes.
We'll cover many of them. So a family conspiracy, honor killing. This is an example of delving into the whole point about women who live under Islam, but also women who live near Islam. That is, American women, for example, yourself, a mosque is nearby, there is an imam, there is material in that mosque that might have been recorded and broadcast in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, and yet it's right there in downtown New York or in Michigan or in Florida because the mosques are connected.
Yes.
So the notion here that we want to include in our conversation tonight is the crimes against women that are happening, and you see them, you've experienced them, and what American women should be thinking. For you've made a great point that American women are really not standing up for this problem, just like the media. In fact, you've got a quote saying that women, organized women in universities are afraid to talk about, I think you said, when brown women are damaged, raped by brown men, it's off limits for women in America to talk about something like that.
Yes, we white folk are not allowed to criticize people of color, even if ideologically, philosophically, we are connected to the female victims of rape or domestic battery or female genital mutilation or polygamy or forced child marriage. And how can child marriage be anything but forced? So, and these things have not only proliferated in the West and Europe, but they're here in the United States. So, for example, I'm sure we all remember that there was a huge case on FGM out of Michigan that was lost at a higher judicial level and not appealed, to the best of my knowledge. And I wrote about this extensively. And I had many American feminists at my back with me. They were with me on this. Whether or not the activism is what's needed is another question. It's been my sorrow and my shame that the feminists who are stuck in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and God bless some of them, they're doing great work. But on this issue, racism trumped sexism. The fear of being called out as a racist became, and also the preoccupation, the obsession with the occupation, so-called, of a country that doesn't exist, Palestine, over and above concern with the occupation of women's bodies worldwide, in the Muslim world, in the non-Western world. And I want to make another important point. Women participate in honor killings. It's not just men. Women gossip, women envy, women decide who to target, women encourage men to do this. Now, And they sometimes perpetrate it hands-on, which to me is beyond belief. But I've studied it, so I know it's true. But the men do this, and they have no choice. I mean, I eventually understood that when a father said, she gave me no choice, I had to kill her, I had to kill her. She made me do it. I was defending myself. When I first heard this, I thought, this is crazy. Now I understand that the entire community would not marry other members of his family, would not do business with him, would shun him if he did not kill the girl. For what? Because she didn't want a veil, because her veil slipped, because somebody said she was talking to a boy when that might not have been the case, or worse, she actually wanted to leave a very abusive marriage to her first cousin, which would be a very big dishonor to her family, and it's forbidden. And if she wanted to advance herself educationally, even though there are exceptions, she could be killed for that. If she wanted to marry someone not chosen by her family, if she went ahead and did it, she's dead. More if she decides to leave Islam and become an apostate, that's a capital crime. And there's a number of women who I've submitted affidavits for to judges in America who became Christian and then fled and miraculously made it out from wherever they were living, whatever nested communities they were in. So, and these women are brave, really brave. But it's not just men who are bad, it's the entire psychological, sociological, economic mindset that women are the property of their families. Their virginity is a prize that must be preserved. It's a value, it's marketable, a value. And that a woman's role is mainly, if not only, to be a mother and a... I wanted to say something about apartheid. It's something that Israel has been falsely accused of for years.
Yep.
Mhm.
Now, Islamic gender apartheid means all those things that you had on a list, which includes child marriage and polygamy and daily, hourly sometimes, beatings to render a girl child subordinate so that she will be obedient and she will live. I mean, it's done so that she will live and then procreate for the honor of the family. And I'm one of the feminists who've studied motherhood and childbirth, and I care about these issues. It's not like I'm saying, oh, that's a bad thing to do. This is the only thing allowed to do. And America has evolved beyond that in significant ways. So Islam, the West, by the way, has been by the very same feminists who say the West is very bad and should never speak because of all of its crimes and sins. Of what? Of colonialism, of imperialism, of slave trading. Guess what? Islam, the leaders, the countries, the mindsets have engaged in slave trading, the African slave trade. They've colonized vast swaths of the world where there used to be Buddhists, and they're now slaughtering Christians, as you know, wherever they can, in Africa and in the Middle East. This is, and in Southeast Asia, very, very worrisome. And they've colonized and they've converted via the sword. And if anyone wants to leave, then you're an apostate and it's a capital crime. So these are all features of cultures that aren't specific to the West. And in fact, in the West, we fought a civil war over the question of slavery. Are we perfect? No. But many Muslims practice slavery today in these times, and the slavery is African slaves. So I would love the mass media and the feminists in my world to get a grip and to understand that it's a very big world. And it's not the West alone or solely or mainly or the worst actor on the stage. It's not us. And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, does it make your head explode when you see some of these so-called feminists from Hollywood and wherever standing alongside of Linda Sarsour types that are all burqa'd up and screaming racism, 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 and still screaming feminism as part of their mantra?
It does. It does. And it made me crazy. Linda Sarsour, who's only for Palestine and for herself and has never done anything for women that I'm aware of, now has blurbs for a book she wrote from major feminists. I think, have they lost their minds completely? Or is their concept of a feminist agenda mainly race and Islam? For many it is. I mean, I remember defending Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who's a very brave hero, from women's studies professors who called her an Islamophobe and a racist. Now, if anyone has ever met Ayaan or seen her, and I've been privileged to work with her, she's tall, beautiful, slender, and very dark in skin. She's called a racist by very white feminists who are more righteous than thou, purer than the driven snow. I think they're so afraid of being shunned and perhaps their reputations tarnished, their jobs lost, their friends lost, their funding gone, because that's what happens when you tell the truth on these subjects in our great country.
Mm. Well, we've got somebody who got cut off with us said that you started out, or just about the time it cut out, you were talking about honor killing and doing an explanation on that. Can you go back and do a little bit more on that?
Yes, yes. An honor killing is primarily the murder by a family makes a decision. It's not just the uncle, the brother, and the father and the grandfather. It's also the mother and the aunt and the sister who decides that this one has shamed us and will ruin our chances of making marriage mates and of doing business. We will not be able to hold our heads up. We will be shunned as a family. And they're right. They would be, unless we can change the mind of the entire collectivity. So it's usually young daughters, average age 17, okay? And that's one study that I did in Middle East Forum, Middle East Quarterly. And then there's a subset of wives, the difference, however, and twice the age. The difference is that the wife's own family, 40% of the time in this one study, helps the husband's family kill her because she wants to leave him because he beats her senseless every day. And she thinks she will die, and she's got no place to run to. Her family won't take her back. So the Hindus in India, but not in the West, perpetrate honor killings for very different reasons than Muslims do. Hindus, it's a caste violation. If you marry the wrong caste or engage yourself to or are going steady with or want to marry somebody who's the wrong caste or an inferior caste, then you'll be killed. And my last study, the fourth study, looked at the role that women play in honor killing, and they do play a significant role. It is a collective decision. It's not one undertaken just by one member of the family. That's why I called it a family conspiracy. Now imagine the psychology of being a girl growing up in a family where the people who you must trust and with whom you live might suddenly one day kill you. The paranoia, the inability to trust, the conformity, the anxiety. I mean, and then put a burqa on and you see you have a very traumatized human being, my view.
What, in terms of what people could do in the West, what do you think would be the number one thing, or are there multiple things that people can go and do to try and help change that mindset with Muslims? Or is that strictly a hopeless, and that's the way it's going to be not only in the Middle East, but also in the West?
Well, I think we should certainly, and our government has been, because I've been dealing with political asylum cases brought by those who've escaped being unkilled, and judges want to know from experts, is this credible? Is this true? I mean, is she telling the truth? It sounds so crazy. So that one thing we can do is support the political asylum cases brought by women for this reason. And for men also for this reason. If a man marries up or marries wrong, or if he's a dissident or an apostate, or if he's gay, he's dead. So he may also be applying for asylum here. And we should, in the midst of this worldwide epidemic, hopefully when it ends, we can reassess our priorities and our possibilities. That's one thing. Yes.
Let me inject just a comment on this. I think it's appropriate. We have situations where this is happening in America. It may be that Indian people, when they come here, they forget the caste system. They don't do this. But the Muslim people, when they come here, they still go to the 3,400 mosques. They still hear the message about women are properties. They certainly behave with this mindset. We have a case in Michigan, and this is the point I want to get to. We have a case in Michigan of a 39-year-old woman about to do a deposition in an American divorce, and the week before that occurs, she's killed. Her son is indicted. Her son is charged. There's no investigation of what you just said, the family around the son. You know, so there's no awareness. Now, you're obviously educating a judge on how to understand this. The problem we have, and by the way, there's a third person in our group called David Boris. David Boris is a police chief. He has been training law enforcement, primarily in the South, on this topic and others, so that policemen and prosecutors will know what you come in and tell, let's say, as an expert witness. The problem in Michigan, and we have been contacted by people in the police department in that group to say, you know, our chief is refusing to allow us to investigate the father, the imam. There is no interest. We are not interviewing anybody else. There's one 15-year-old young man, he is indicted. Knowing what you know and what David Boris knows, our inability to train that police force in Michigan basically is leading to lawlessness in America. We do not have indictments on honor killing that involve the group that you're talking about, the family.
100%.
So 100%. This is amazingly difficult because we're not allowed to train the prosecutors, the judges, the police.
Well, apparently we had a problem in Homeland Security as well, okay, with a lot of doublethink and disinformation and words you can't say. Exactly. So, and it's really connected. I think that I hold Islam responsible for not excommunicating the murderers in their midst. Perhaps they don't preach, kill her. Perhaps the Quran doesn't cleanly say, kill her. It leads up to it, but there's lots of disputes about that. Fine. They should be preaching in the mosques and preaching in the temples that this is an abomination, and if you do anything like this, we will excommunicate you. We will excommunicate your family. I was thinking that as I was studying the honor killings across Europe, that the way to go, one way to go, is not just even sentence and jail the perps, but then deport them and deport their entire families so that they will understand there's a heavy, heavy price to pay for disobeying Western laws. And I think we need to do that here. When I've said that, people say, but that's very radical. And I say, well, but the problem is very radical. It's very radical. I mean, you remember the poor soul who was beheaded by her husband in Buffalo, New York, who had left him. She had dared to leave him. He was a bully. He was a tyrant, a nightmare, Pakistani man who was setting up a television cable network to help Muslims have a better image in the West. So, and I read the trial transcript. It was really very painful because he felt he was justified, that she left him, she took his kids, you know.
So let me inject for a second, because I think this is really important. If we had not lost the ability to train police, all we need is one indictment, let's say the one in Michigan. People are brought into trial under oath. if we had one investigation that was done well, the imam is indicted, the father's indicted, the mother's indicted, the indictments bring, Americans love to watch court cases. If we had one case that was done properly, it would be sensational and people would be learning, how could this possibly be? Just learning what you know. And to me, what's missing, and that's why it's so harmful, that we have not been able to train people. All we need is one good indictment with a good prosecutor, an educated judge, of course, an educated jury, and we would have a number of people indicted, convicted, and go to jail and maybe deported. We can't even get to that one. That's the challenge.
I want you to send me the details of this case, and if I in any way can be helpful in terms of police or police training, please call on me.
Thank you.
I also think that it's not impossible, but it's difficult to train entire tribal communities that may wrongfully believe that these practices are religiously sanctioned or mandated, and as opposed to this is just tribal behavior and it should be left behind. I'm not saying that family is bad or that extended family is bad. I'm saying that tribal behavior is something else entirely.
Well, think about that. That's a brilliant way to put it. We really have a tribal mentality, and we have allowed the tribal mentality to permeate our country. 3,400 mosques. Every one of those mosques has an imam. By and large, majority of those mosques talk about Sharia adherence. There have been mosque studies, etc. So we are allowing, in our communities, we can walk past a mosque. Inside that mosque, there's a tribal mentality, most likely. That means when the men in that mosque leave and walk out into the community, they're interacting with non-Muslims, and yet in their mindset, there's a tribal. One of the points we tried to get across is, we're going to set feminist women aside, the ones that you've talked about. Let's talk about, let's just talk about women in general. We'll talk about Jewish women, Catholic women, evangelical women who are interested in family, etc. What should they be? Should they actually be concerned if there are communities in their community where people have this mindset? What is the jeopardy to a 35-year-old housewife who lives in a neighborhood with a mosque?
On her watch, in her time, under God, she is letting barbarism run amok. And that's heavy on the conscience. Now, I'm not certain how easy it is to rescue a girl who may go back, like a domestically battered wife will go back many times, and a child is going to feel unsafe if not in the bosom of the abusive family. This is not easy, but I think if we had the willingness of a community to work on this problem, to really talk about enforcement of the law and of human rights and of what we should tolerate and not the intolerance which we should not tolerate, I think we could make headway via education if it was very forceful, with a clear plan. But now look, you mentioned Michigan. I think the SWAT. I think so I worked for more than 50 years to help, women have public positions, rightfully so. I don't regret it. But what's this? What's this Taleb and this? Yes. A friend of mine made a terrible joke. It's Alexandria occasional cortex. It's a terrible joke, but I like it. The likes.
Ilhan, right, the squad, right.
Ilhan, oh man, and nothing sticks to her. Of this scandal, if it had happened.
Where's the indictment? Where's one indictment? One, we don't see one.
Nothing. Who has her back? Who's afraid of bringing it forth?
But I think that's where it comes back to the training, the law enforcement training. Our judicial officials need to be trained to understand what the crime is. They are so afraid of speaking anything Islam because they will be called an Islamophobe. They will be called a racist when Islam is not a race. But But that's what they're all fearing. Oh my God, how can they, get called that and still run for office if it's an office they have to run for? If they have to be anything public, Islam is fine. Islam will be.
Well, cowardice can sink our ship.
It really is, and it has.
And your point, I think, is well taken. You understand the brutality and the lost life of a child in a Muslim community that we're allowing to happen in America. We're allowing a 9-year-old girl to be married to an older man. We're not doing anything about it. We're allowing a woman to be killed and only her son indicted, not all the people that did it. That is a lawlessness that's dangerous to everybody who's not a Muslim.
Right.
That's what we don't seem to be able to understand.
Utah is trying to legalize polygamy. I'm tracking it. The virus halted it for the moment. Why? Because women involved in plural marriage may want to report domestic violence and child abuse, but they don't want to then be collared for being polygamists, so they don't come forward. So there must be other better ways of solving this problem besides legalizing polygamy. My fear is, let Utah legalize polygamy. It'll become a very, very populous Muslim state filled with people living on welfare. I mean, that it may not be as true here. No, it's true here. And the FGM case came out of Michigan as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. And by the way, let me just mention that. So that is a case with lots and lots of documentation. It was thrown out on a technicality in the federal law. Michigan politicians made a big deal out of passing their own law. They made a point about passing their own law
after the fact.
But why hasn't Michigan done their own indictment using the evidence of the federal case?
Because this crime was committed before Michigan passed its own law. That's their answer.
Okay, well, we work with people who work on FGM. We know that, I forgot the number, Mary, 35 states have passed it. There's not one indictment. Some of these things have been on the books, in some states for a longer time. I know Georgia, Florida, they all have statutes, not one indictment. I've never heard of an imam being indicted for anything, even immigration fraud.
Well, what about hate speech that leads to rioting, that leads to murder?
Yep.
No such thing as yet, but it may come.
Well, we're going to have Raymond Ibrahim on next week. We've had Rabbi Hausman and others talking about Islamic Jew hatred. We just don't seem to be able to deal. Don't seem to be able to deal again with the justice system in that regard. So we have, in my opinion, there's certain parts of the country where I don't know why a person who's Jewish would continue to live in certain parts of Michigan or other places.
Are they there still?
Yeah, there are. By the way, I was reading some of your background. You were talking about the Jews, some of the countries in the Middle East where there just either are no Jews.
It's Judenrein. It's completely, the thing that kills me is everyone.
Say the word again.
Judenrein, it's German word, Judenrein. Free of Jews, ethnic cleansing, Nazi style. And that has been the story of Jews in Muslim countries from the very beginning until now. Iran holds about 35,000 Jews hostage, won't let them leave. There's a couple hundred in Morocco. I mean, so all the Jews were first taxed, jailed, tortured, murdered, and exiled if they were lucky. Their property confiscated, country after country. When Israel came into being, then there was a good new excuse. Aha, it's not just that the Quran preaches kill Jews, hate them and kill them. They're subhuman, they're not human. No, it's because the state of Israel, a sovereign state, is daring, the only one in the world, the Jewish state, daring to exist in the midst, surrounded by all these Muslim countries. And everybody in the West who is uninformed or misguided or stupid, they go along with this way of thinking. So Israel has Muslims and Christians, and it preserves the places of worship of all the Baha'i, etc., etc. Not so in any Muslim country. And there's no reciprocity, and the West doesn't demand reciprocity. I'm very, very concerned, and I've written over the years some amount about the persecution of Christians, I've called for the Pope to step in and offer asylum to all the Christians, but he has offered asylum to the Muslims.
Right.
I don't get it.
We've actually tried to talk to people about trying to get him to step down. He's so bad. But
I like the film The Two Popes. That was a sweet fiction. A sweet fiction if you've seen it.
So is there another area real quick, because we do want to get to questions and we are going to end at 8 o'clock. Is there another area of the way women are treated or children that you saw that had a lasting impression on you that you want to make sure American women, again, in my opinion, American women are going to address this problem? I'm not saying men are not interested, but this is the survival and safety of women and children and young boys. Young boys are also mistreated, of course. What other example maybe do you have that you think would really speak directly to American women who are not Muslims?
Well, first we have American girls and women who become jihadists, who convert to Islam because the burden of freedom or the poverty and the abuse, these are two factors within their own family, weighs on them, and they're indoctrinated into a belief. Remember ISIS, may it remain perished. They believe that then they'll be happy and of value, and even if they become suicide killers, they will be of value. So Americans and European Christian girls can, drink the Kool-Aid is the phrase.
Right.
Then the children, now let's say you have children in school, it's a public school, it's not a religious school, and the girls, I hate to bring it up so late in the program, but look across Europe, the gang rapes, the grooming, the Muslim grooming gangs, not Asian groups. This is mainly men from Pakistan who have, and the police have not stopped them for years, many years. They would they would hit on girls who were in group homes, whose families were dysfunctional. And they gave them a little present, they got them some candy, they talked nicely to them, and then they drugged them, and then they gang raped them, and then they held them hostage for the rest of their lives. And the British police looked the other way, and anyone who tried to stand up for them found himself in very hot water. Tommy Robinson is one person I think of.
Yep.
So now it's true that pimps come in all religions and they come in all colors, and we can't just focus on one. But what happened in Sweden and Germany in terms of when there's Christmas fairs or street fairs or holiday times, masses, it's like Tahrir Square in Cairo, masses, hordes of men raping and penetrating and terrifying large numbers of girls and women. This is behavior we don't want to see here. We have bad dudes here, but we don't have that cultural pattern of all infidel women are fair game and you can pounce on them. Fresh meat was that crazy imam from Malaysia. You can pounce on them. They're yours. They belong to you. You can do what you want. If we're not careful, if we don't make sure that Muslim boys who are growing up in America don't think this way, we're in trouble. If we allow all kinds of immigrants with no careful vetting here, we're at risk of this kind of mass rape, which is routine in the Muslim world. It's not unusual.
It's routine in Britain, of all places. That's what's amazing. Britain, we're close to Britain in terms of law, appreciation, and value systems. It's overwhelming what has happened there, and that is a big concern. We have a sex trafficking problem in America. We know of investigation. You will, however, not see typically the background of the perpetrator. They just will not acknowledge, my experience in the Midwest, they will not acknowledge the perpetrator's background, whether he came from another country or whether he was a refugee, or certainly will not say whether or not he was Muslim. And unfortunately, when you understand what you understand about the way women are treated, this is an accident waiting to happen. If that's your mentality. By the way, there's plenty of Pakistani immigrants who are Muslims in America, so we need to be careful, and women need to engage on this topic so we don't have the problem.
Yeah, of course. And I work with Muslims and ex-Muslims, and you know, I often find myself saying, but my friends are Muslim too, you know, and I don't hate all Muslims, certainly not. But the issue for us is this: during the World War II, there were good Germans, and they were also opportunists and collaborationists, and they were cowardly, and they didn't stand up to the evil in their midst. And so even though they may have been good and wanted to do good, they sort of became bystanders to enormous, profound evil. So Muslims need to step up themselves. They need to reform that religion or the kinds of mosques that they've allowed to dominate them. They need to take this on.
By the way, I think if we get in a position where we're indicting people for these kind of crimes, we're educating people, we're declaring that it's illegal, no matter what the Sharia folks say it is. It's not. I think people will have the courage. Your good Muslim will have the courage to do more in America if we establish an environment of law and order, and we put some of the imams in prison where we have to. I think that will open the floodgates for Muslims who want to live a better life. In the meantime, they run the risk, if they try to speak up or reform, and they're really not seeing America necessarily helping them along. So we've got a few minutes left. Phyllis, if you will let us issue a couple questions, we can wrap it up. But I know there's some questions waiting, Mary.
There are, but I do want to read. This was a glowing report on you by Bruce Bauer, Islam Women, and Phyllis Chesler. So if you would allow me to read this last paragraph in this article, and I'll post it in with the webinar when I get it posted tomorrow. This is about you. This is official feminism in 2017. It is a mark of her strength of character, her enduring warrior spirit, and her fierce, abiding devotion to freedom and equality for all women that Phyllis Chesler refuses to be a part of it and isn't cowed for a moment by any of the noxious name-calling she's routinely subjected to. Islamic Gender Apartheid is an informative and illuminating piece of work. It is also a noble work, an act of moral duty and, yes, of love by a woman who make no mistake, is the real thing. And I think that describes you to a T. And we're just so blessed to have you tonight and talking about all of this. And we do have a few questions, if you would allow me, and they're growing as we're talking.
I have questions too.
Okay. Well, do you want to throw your questions out? Let's let your questions be first.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm at the service of the listener, the viewer.
All right. We've got, you mentioned at the outset that you have been somewhat naive early on when you were being wooed. Just curious, where you grew up, where you were educated, and how old you were when you went to Afghanistan.
Oh, I was 20 years old. And I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and was very smart and reading books, but quite naive in terms of worldly events. We never discussed Islam. We never discussed it.
Not back then.
We discussed Freud and Dostoevsky and De Sica and Fellini.
Oh my goodness.
Proust. We didn't discuss religion.
Interesting. We've come up with a term, some of us who live in Michigan. We've seen some young girls, college girls, convert to Islam. We've seen an imam's wife come to visit us in a hijab, beautiful young Midwest college girl. So we use the phrase, for people who are old enough to remember, Omar Sharif. Omar Sharif is a very attractive Middle Eastern guy. And,
loved him, yes.
Wait.
Whoa.
In my book, I have to find it now that you mentioned Omar Sharif. I'm trying to convey how this could happen. I don't know if I can find it. I'm just
take your time. I think it's important. While you do that, let me just mention. We talked about the fact that typically on a college campus, you've got a lot of guys who don't know what they want to do. They don't go to class. They might be involved in drugs. They would just as soon be on mom's couch back home. And then next to them is this good-looking guy from another country with a really nice car, and he is, the women are attracted, and so that's kind of our Omar Sharif notion.
Nicely dressed, nicely coiffed, and hair. Yes.
So
Find
we
it?
never
I
discussed.
say,
Hold on.
found it.
Go ahead.
I am 18 and I have just met my prince. He is a dark, handsome, charming, sophisticated, and wealthy foreign student.
There you go.
The whole world is mine. I believe I am invincible and will live forever. True, he is a Muslim and I am a Jew. I am very Jewish, but he is the Aga Khan and I am Rita Hayworth. He is Yul Brynner and I am Gertrude Lawrence in The King and I. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh,
I think that's a very
Beautiful.
powerful message. We've got a lot of young women. The more we've got all these foreign students, American universities make a lot of money with direct money coming from Saudi Arabia and other places.
Yes.
And these gentlemen, whether they're the Muslim Student Association or not, they're on campus, they're out and about, and it's really, really unfortunate for a young woman to fall into that trap. So I think
It
your book
is, it
really
is.
important.
One doesn't wish to generalize, but in general, this is the truth, that back home and psychologically within, it's different. It's different.
well, we've got a question, and I'm not sure the answer on this, but we talked about the indictments. Do we know anything about the Minnesota police officer that killed that young lady? Do you remember?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he reached across his partner with his gun out. She was at the window, and he killed her.
Right.
The answer is I don't know what happened there. That's a great
Yeah.
question. It's just a good reminder. That's be an example of an attitude towards women. A policeman, a Sharia-compliant policeman, hired in Minnesota, actually shot across his partner in the car a woman who was coming to the
Right.
window for help.
She was she was from Europe as well. I think she was not a U.S. citizen, but she was marrying a man that was in Minnesota, and she needed some help for something. Came to the police officer's car when the Muslim officer shot across and killed her.
I
Did
don't know
he
the
ever
status.
say why?
Nothing.
I think there is more to the story. Let me just say I don't think we're doing it justice. I don't know, but I'm sure people can Google that. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Okay, we've got, can Phyllis speak to the child brides in temporary marriages as found in literature
No.
the literature that was found in a Michigan mosque?
Oh dear. Siga. It's very pandemic in Iran and in Egypt, and I'm sure elsewhere. I don't know of specific cases in America, but I wouldn't be surprised if they existed. That means if a man doesn't want to bother marrying someone, but wants to have an overnight affair, he will, quote, marry her. There was a very good documentary about this. He'll marry her, and the girl might think it's a real marriage, but oh no, next day he's gone, not real. But that's a version of legal prostitution. Islamic style.
Yes.
So by the way, just to put color on that particular story, in Michigan, one of our friends, Dave Gabatz, was in a mosque, a Shia mosque in Dearborn, and found literature specifically addressing temporary marriages and specifically addressing child marriage. And
Well,
so
that's illegal. That's prostitution. It's illegal in all countries.
Yep.
But
So-
so much that is trafficked and illegal prostitution. I don't believe prostitution is sex work. I'm one of those abolitionist feminists who believe, no, pornography is not good and prostitution is not good for women. It's a killing field. And the amount of abuse that you routinely take turn you immediately to drugs and alcohol and a short shelf life and a miserable life. And you have 1% of girls or women who say, oh, it didn't bother me. Oh, I saved for medical school. 1%. Most of it is blue collar work, highly dangerous, very often illegal. And there are a number of feminists who believe, listen, illegal is not good. Let's legalize it. At least there'll be less of a stigma. I don't think that's true because the nature of the job remains the same. You get paid to be raped. You get paid to be cursed. You get paid to be denigrated. That's not such a good job. And people will say, yes, but what about working in a plutonium factory if it's the only gig in town? Well, what about it?
Well, you made an interesting point, Phyllis. You said there are people who want to legalize it. And the interesting point is it is legal in Sharia. What we're talking about is legal.
Yes.
And that's the devastation. We got 3,400 places where some aspects of Sharia are provided to everyone who attends. That's the problem. And the message the other message related to this Michigan story is, why are we having third-party brave people, civilians, going into these mosques when we do not have police or the FBI going in and picking up that material, understanding that material is promoting crime and doing some investigation? We are depending on bravest among us who are not paid by police departments to do a job. It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a very big problem because we do have a separation of state and religion, blessedly so in this country, not in most Muslim countries. So it's a little tricky, but you're absolutely right. A crime is a crime. Religion is no exemption.
Well, that's all.
Culture is no exemption.
That's all of the questions, and thank you for every piece of information. And the more you describe this, the more it has to be stopped. We have to be doing something to get this recognized and understood and indicted, as Dick says, because if we don't, then we're going to lose this country.
Hopefully that will not happen, but we must be vigilant and forceful and have great courage of our convictions.
Amen.
Thank you so much for having me.
How do we keep in touch with Phyllis Chesler? Give us the contact information.
I have a website, www.phyllis2Ls-Chesler1L.com. My books are available online, or if there are bookstores left, perhaps in some bookstores. I used to love bookstores.
I did too. I do.
Ah, well, but you can buy my books the minute we hang up now. And I was asked to show
the books again in the title.
Please show them, yes.
An American Bride in Kabul.
Okay.
And this is a family conspiracy on a killing. Look at that wonderful, haunting cover.
Oh.
That New English Review Press
look at
gave
that,
me.
with the shining,
Yes, a face in the knife.
Aha, I've looked at that a million times. Now I see the
And
face.
look at this, another brilliant cover. Islamic Gender Apartheid. What do you see?
Yeah, dead body.
People aren't sure. These are women in burqas with blood pooling around them. They're on the ground.
Yep.
Wow.
Right?
Right.
Exposing a veiled war against women. The war is veiled. It's verboten. You can't talk about it.
Yes.
All right, my friends, we will remain in touch. Thank you for being there.
Thank you very much. By the way, we can talk about it. You just did. And we appreciate
Yes, that's true. We can.
We can do it. We need to do it. We need women to talk about what they heard tonight. Mary, you'll have it posted in a little bit, and people can get that posting. Again, we apologize for the interruption.
Oh, well.
We're going to invite Phyllis. You can stay with us if you'd like, Phyllis. I've got just 5 minutes of tell you and others what else is coming. But let me just again thank you so much for what you've put out tonight.
My pleasure.
For us to see. Thank you so much. And I'm going to see if I can share a little bit here. All right. Yeah, we've talked about all these crimes. It's incredible, and we've had firsthand experience with that. We wanted people to remember tomorrow at 11 o'clock, a radio show is available with Tom Trento. He is the director of United West. That's why we have our webinars, and he's on every day. Next week, stay tuned. There might be some news about some other ways we can have Tom Trento in your living room in the morning. We know there are people who need to do morning activities, given that people are at home. We have another webinar two days from now. Dr. Mark Christian will be live with us from Omaha. His group, he's giving us a Middle East update with very specific topics, such as the ones listed. And I think, will India survive Islam? That's an interesting. He is from Egypt, and he was an imam, so he's a Christian now, and so he's, again, another wonderful expert. We're very blessed. Claire Lopez will be with us on Monday for her news analysis, and then we'll follow a week later with Christine Douglas Williams. Christine was with us, was it last night? My goodness. And
it was.
we've already posted Christine Douglas Williams news analysis from last night. So this is the busiest lady in the webinar world. Looking at her. Raymond Ibrahim will be with us next week. Remember, Raymond was banned from the Army War College. He got back into the Army War College. He's been writing very, very prolifically. He'll be with us next week. the action items. We talked about the Army for Trump last week. That's still one of our top action items. We're adding another one. We're not going to show that. I'm sorry. We're adding another one tonight, which is what would a thinking woman do? And we're going to suggest that you follow Phyllis Chesler. I think, Phyllis, that is your Twitter handle. And
I swear I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it.
All right, I picked it up from going there, so I think it is. So there's a lot of information. We want you to be active. We want you to remember the United West in your giving if you can. Believe it or not, we have computers that are failing. We actually have people that are working quite diligently. We apologize for the break in tonight's action, but I want to tell you, Phyllis, everybody came back.
They
we
did.
Disconnected technically, and the participants came roaring back. So that's a tribute to you and what you started in just the very beginning.
And to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for being there, for knowing what you know. Everyone should follow them. Okay, I'm signing off.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
night,
Thank
Phyllis.
you.
Everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.